Story 1. Tooth pain from an abscess was unbearable. I was crying on the floor at the pharmacy while getting medication and couldn't eat for days. Felt like someone was stabbing me in the side of my mouth. Story 2. I have experienced many injuries, some worse than others, but none compare to the pain of spraining my toe. It's similar to the pain of stubbing it, except it lasted for 2 weeks. It was terrible. Story 3. Emotional pain, combined with physical pain, brings me to the edge of wanting to die. After experiencing various types of intense physical pain, I find that emotional pain is the worst I have ever felt. Story 4. Probably proctalgia fugax. It feels like a dozen knives are stabbing your colon at once. It's a spasm of the rectum and truly feels like you are going to die. Episodes usually last around 10 minutes, but I've had several episodes lasting longer than 2 hours. Story 5. I had a seizure on a treadmill a couple of years ago and landed on my shoulder. For the next few weeks, every time I lifted my arm, my shoulder would partially dislocate, and it was agonizing each time. I was afraid to lift my arm too high for about a year afterward. Story 6. Discovering that the girl I believed I would marry and who I truly loved never existed was devastating. Everything she told me about herself was a lie. When she claimed to be going to her finance job every day, she was actually engaging in sexual activities with older men for money. Each time she had a meeting or commitment, I later found out it corresponded with a rendezvous in a cheap hotel or summer cottage while the man's family was away. Story 7. All the way leading up to when you decide to leave for the maternity floor is challenging. You try moving, lying down, taking a bath, but nothing works. You have to twitch a foot or hum through the peak. Sure, someone will say to go to the hospital. However, they won't take you until you're at 4 centimeters and at the right stage. It's neither silent nor painless to reach that stage. Story 8. The headache I experienced when I caught COVID-19 was unlike anything I've ever had. I haven't heard many people mention headaches as a symptom, but the intensity and duration were unprecedented for me. It lasted about a day and a half and was nearly constant during that time. It was terrifying as it felt like my own brain was trying to take me down. Story 9. Food poisoning from contaminated shrimp. I remember being curled up on the bathroom floor for hours, wishing someone would come in and help me. Felt like I was being stabbed in the lower belly and back repeatedly. Overall, it lasted almost 16 hours. My mom found me on the bathroom floor sleeping the next morning. Story 10. Pulmonary embolism. I woke up at 4 a.m. in horrible pain with every single breath. As I got up and walked around, it only got worse. Waiting for all the tests at the hospital and speaking to doctors while every breath felt like a large knife going in and out of my lung was torture. I will never take breathing painlessly for granted again. Story 11. Flipped over the handlebars of my motorcycle at 55 miles per hour into the chat on the side of the road, and then tumbled into a field. There was no helmet, no padded riding gear, and no one around. After 65 stitches, road rash, broken ribs, and several broken fingers, I made it home after a 2-mile walk in the dark. That was not a good night. Story 12. I experienced headaches that lasted for about 3 months. They started at the joint where my jaw connects to my skull, similar to the feeling of chewing very sweet gum, and would migrate to one half of my head. My teeth hurt, and the area where my hair grows on my scalp was also painful. When asked by the doctor to rate the pain, I said 10, as I have a high threshold for pain. The headaches subsided after adjustments and lowering my blood pressure. Story 13. I have stitches in my septum from a septal hematoma. I have experienced concussions, broken bones, and a few car accidents, but nothing compares to having stitches inside my nose. Story 14. I experienced a back spasm and had to crawl down the stairs to my car. By some miracle, I made it to urgent care. I couldn't move an inch without excruciating pain. Story 15. A few years ago, my wife and I decided to allow our daughter to use Facebook on the condition that she maximizes all of her privacy settings and keeps both of us added as friends. We don't want to invade her privacy by prying into everything, but we want to remain visible. My wife is not her biological mother. Her biological mother signed away all her parental rights when my daughter was 2 years old. I have kept pictures and documents of her, knowing that eventually my daughter would want to know what happened. That was a difficult conversation to have. Sometimes we hear her crying in her room at night. My wife and I thought it might be due to teenage hormones. One day, she left her Facebook open on my computer, and I noticed she had found her biological mother and started messaging her. At first, she just introduced herself, then sent random messages about her day. A math test she was nervous about but ended up passing, what she received for her birthday, and things her friends and she were involved in, as well as how excited she was for her homecoming dance, which was her first school dance. Her biological mother did not respond. Her last message wished her biological mother a happy new year, expressing her hope that all her New Year's goals come true and apologizing for reaching out. Now, we both cry ourselves to sleep because I can't find the courage to tell her that I saw her messages, and my heart is breaking all over again for her. Story 16. When my granddad died, I had mini panic attacks every other minute. When I saw an older man, I wished it was him and not my granddad. Story 17. It's a toss-up between the time I seriously injured my shoulder and pulled a muscle in my back. Both were terrible. Story 18. Finding out that my dad passed away after work was my most painful moment to this day. I blamed myself for not being there. I'm doing better now, and seeking professional help during that time was a literal lifesaver. Story 19. Various aspects of my 10th rib slipping into my 9th rib caused instability in my spine and left side ribs for 7 years. During that time, my 1st through 5th ribs also slipped out of place near my spine and got caught under my shoulder blade. In the last 2 years before surgery to correct the issue, I was unable to take a full breath because the left side of my ribcage would not expand fully, and my diaphragm developed muscle knots. The only relief I found before seeing the surgeon was through physical therapy, which included manipulation of my ribcage, cupping, and diaphragm release. Although these treatments were very painful, they ultimately helped reduce my pain for a while. Story 20. Physically, I sprained my ankle so badly that I might have torn a ligament. Emotionally, I have been cheated on twice. I also have to see her move on to her current husband, and they have a child together, something we once dreamed of. Mentally, I feel like no one loves or cares about me. I often feel alone in this world, with no one to change my perspective in any way. Story 21. If we're talking about physical pain, I would say that spraining my groin muscle was the worst. I was longboarding, lost my balance, and put my foot down on the concrete without lifting it up. My other foot remained on the still moving longboard, causing me to essentially do the splits. I screamed. Thankfully, I wasn't going fast, but it was still the worst physical pain I can remember. Story 22. A burst ovarian cyst is a pain I would not wish on my worst enemy. No amount of painkillers alleviated the suffering. Story 23. One time, I stumbled while going down the deck stairs holding a box of bamboo skewers that I was going to use for kebabs later. They opened and spilled, and when I tried to catch myself by taking fast strides down the stairs, one skewer went into the bottom of my foot. It was so deep that I had to go to the emergency room to have it removed, along with getting x-rays and a tetanus shot. I don't recommend it. Story 24. Just under 2 months ago, I fell and broke my hip. If you remember that old Life Alert commercial where the woman says, "I've fallen and I can't get up," that was me on the emergency call. They took me to the emergency room. I was admitted just after midnight and spent the next 12 hours on a gurney in the hallway waiting for surgery. A full anterior hip replacement. It hurt just lying there, and if I moved, it was excruciating. I really damaged my hip. Morphine? Yes, please. Fentanyl? That's quite a substance, but they only dulled the pain. After the surgery, there's a common belief that after a hip replacement, you'll be up and walking the same day. That's not true. If you injure your hip, you'll be in pain for at least a month. Story 25. When I was a child, a classmate attempted to cut my ear off with scissors. I can still hear the crunching noise as he snipped away at my skin and cartilage. Even in my 30s, I get nervous when a barber cuts near my ears. Story 26. I gave my mother an ultimatum. Either she continues to be friends with my child's abuser or with me. She cannot expect me to maintain contact with her while she is close friends with a person who has harmed children. She chose the abuser. It is difficult to describe the pain I feel. It is a twisted mixture of deep anguish and bleak desolation. Story 27. Being forced to take antipsychotic medication comes with significant side effects. Oh, what I would rather endure than the anhedonia induced by these medications. Story 28. Urinating after a ureteral stent, which was placed for kidney stones, was a painful experience. I remember feeling intense pain and fearing the urge to urinate, delaying until I could not hold it any longer. The burning, searing pain was horrible, and in some ways it felt worse than the kidney stone itself. Story 29. I have broken bones, but I cannot remember the pain. I can recall how searing hot my sternum tattoo was. The long lines felt like a hot scalpel cutting deeper as my chest rose to breathe. Story 30. Plantar fasciitis and the unexpected death of a loved one can be incredibly immobilizing and frustrating. The time needed for healing can stretch unpredictably, prompting profound reflections on the meaning of life and existence. Story 31. Not localized pain, but a general physical and mental torment throughout my existence, precipitated by opioid withdrawal from taking Suboxone too soon. I am in and out of disbelief about how badly I messed up every few moments, continuously waking up into a nightmare. Story 32. I drove myself to the hospital, pulling over multiple times to vomit from sheer pain. After receiving pain medication, I slept well. Story 33. I had a cracked molar with an abscess on the side where I experienced trigeminal neuralgia. The tooth cracked in a way that, if I bit down incorrectly, it pinched the nerve between the broken halves, causing instant searing pain. The trigeminal neuralgia was inescapable. I increased my maintenance medication to the highest doses I could tolerate, to the point of being unable to function due to sedation, but it didn't alleviate the pain. I tried using heat, but there was no change. I couldn't drink anything on that side because the pressure of the liquid against my cheek would trigger a wave of pain. I spent time grabbing the flesh of my right cheek with a clawed hand, digging my nails in and twisting my hand to create a new pain that distracted me from the nerve pain. My dentist kindly saw me the following Monday, put me on antibiotics, and then had a cancellation the next day and called to offer it to me first so I could have the tooth extracted. The antibiotics made it bearable, but I experienced less pain after the extraction than before, even considering post-surgical discomfort, because the nerve was no longer flaring up. Story 34. Physically, my gallbladder nearly ruptured, requiring open surgery. Mentally, losing my father on Valentine's Day has been incredibly difficult. My heart can't take much more. Story 35. I cut my cornea with contact lenses and couldn't open my eyes for a day. Even the slightest light made my eyes sting. Story 36. I broke my right tibia and fibula 10 years ago. I have never felt so much pain in my life. I now have a titanium rod and 4 screws in my leg permanently. Story 37. I have an inflamed gallbladder. Between June and October of last year, I experienced 8 separate gallbladder attacks, which caused me hours of agony. No amount of painkillers or movement would provide relief. I was hospitalized twice due to this condition, and only once did I stay overnight. Story 38. I tried breaking up a dog fight, and when I finally got them apart, the one defending against my dog attempted to lunge back into the fight. I accidentally moved my arm in the way, and he grappled with me for a few seconds before seemingly realizing what happened and letting go. He then began fighting the dog I had just pried off him. Story 39. Headache following a lumbar puncture. I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. It went on for 3 days until they had to perform a blood patch procedure. Took weeks to recover. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.